Yep, go ahead. You're welcome.
Yeah. Appreciate it. And, hello, everyone. Jared and I are super excited to be here today. And it's kind of the combination of a lot of things that we're most passionate about. So we get to talk about space, and we get to talk about mining, and we get to talk about diversity and inclusion, and we get to talk about ourselves. It's perfect. It's everything we care about. No, I'm just kidding. But on a more serious note, before we get started, I'd like to make a quick acknowledgement just how fortunate and blessed we are to be welcome to live and make our living here on Treaty 6 territory in the traditional homeland of the Métis. I'd like to thank Samia Dewan for inviting us to join the group here today and to talk about our space mining ventures. Kira Sawatsky, who is our co-host, she won't be joining us today. Unfortunately, her maternity leave came a little bit earlier than expected. We don't have a baby quite yet, but she's due any day, and things are happening pretty quickly. And Jared and I couldn't be more excited for her.
All right, so who we are. Now, Peter Lucas Project Management is a Saskatchewan-based project services company serving Western Canada since 2011. So we really step in to offer, whether it's capital portfolio management or additional project horsepower, and being able to help with candidate searching and hiring support as well. So basically, we maximize human potential for our staff and for our clients. We're passionate about people and maximizing potential, and we seek to create a supportive, collaborative, diverse and inclusive cross-sector project delivery service that matches people's strengths and passions with client needs through our unique character match process.
We're not here to talk about Peter Lucas. We could, but we're here to talk about space mining. I think you'll quickly realize that Jared and I are kind of idealists. We're incredibly privileged people, and we've known each other for a long time, and we're looking for an opportunity to collaborate on something, work together, that a way to use that privilege that we have to do something, to open up opportunity for others, something we're good at, and something that won't embarrass our families. So we decided space mining at least does two of those three things, because let's face it, it's not the first conversation that comes up at dinner with the in-laws, but we both like space and we both like mining, so why not try to put those things together? But I guess the question, of course, is, was there something actually there? So now more than any time during the course of our lives, I think the motivators for space development are quite clear, to me at least. So the incredible legacy of human accomplishment in some ways hangs in the balance. One errant asteroid or one wrong person on the nuclear codes, which is probably a lot more likely these days, has the risk of wiping out millions of years of evolution of life and everything that we, humanity, has collectively created. Now, I don't really think that keeps many of us up at night. It doesn't keep me up at night. But from a pure risk management perspective, it does make sense to diversify where we live. But life can't exist off-planet without off-planet resources. It's simply too expensive and too damaging to sustain life off Earth by blasting everything out of the Earth's gravity well. So from an economic perspective, invariably, all aspects of mining in space and here on Earth require economic opportunity. And I'll touch on that a lot more later. But just recently there was an article in Forbes magazine talking about an asteroid whose value was $10 quintillion or some absurd amount. A value, of course, that completely ignores supply and demand laws. But it was a shocking enough dollar value to garner quite a bit of public attention and to get a lot of clicks on the internet. Now, from an environmental perspective, there are many reasons to mine off Earth. And we're still probably decades away from the Jeff Bezos vision of doing all mining and manufacturing off of Earth to preserve our planet, our home. But there are a lot of short-term benefits as well. The space economy right now is worth over $500 billion. And every ounce of fuel or material used by these thousands of satellites have to be lifted from Earth, which is an expensive and frankly damaging exercise to the environment. Obtaining fuel and materials off Earth can reduce the environmental impact of space activities today. And finally, just the advancement of science and humanity in general. JFK famously said, we go to space not because it's easy, but because it's hard. Chasing the next frontier is a great unifying undertaking for humanity and always has been, throughout the history of our species. But there are tons of tangible benefits here on Earth from the work that happens in space. Things like climate research, global positioning systems, satellite radio, global internet access, and technological advancements made for space travel that we use every day today. A few of these include ear thermometers, which with my 3 boys, I'm using way more than I'd like. Cordless tools, which I use a lot less. Memory foam, and there's a whole bunch of other things. And this principle applies not just to consumer products, but across all sectors. So technology that we're developing for mining in space today will also provide that return on investment for on-Earth mining applications long before we're actually mining in the cosmos.
All right, so the 2020s, this decade, the new space race. Now, this space race is a bit different than what you'd remember from the 1960s. It's no longer about the demonstration of technology and power between 2 nations, or at least not yet. But it's more ushered about by private companies chasing the economic opportunities out there. Now, the federal government is basically directing all resources towards ways that Canada can participate in the Artemis program, which is NASA's plan to return humans to the surface of the moon by 2024. And they want to establish a permanent human presence by 2028. So Canada has a very high profile in this endeavor. And Canada is supposed to be the second country in the history of the world to send humans to the moon, which is pretty fascinating. Now, again, private industry is the big differentiator in the 2020 space race, with companies seemingly popping up left, right, and center to take advantage of what many expect to be huge commercial economic opportunities. And we're in a unique position to participate in this history.
So the idea, this has only been about a 12-month journey, so a year. It's been a bumpy one, I'd say, in some ways, but also really exciting. But turning back the clock 12 months, January 2020, we kind of came up with this notion, decided we want to pursue it. And the basis of that notion was, that Saskatchewan is not completely unlike outer space. And that has driven technological advancements over the history of mining here in the province. So remote areas demand remote exploration techniques that drive innovation in autonomous and semi-autonomous technology. Familiarity with working environments with limited infrastructure. So things like, there's no 4G networks underground. You don't have global positioning systems underground. And there's many areas of the province where where GPS coverage is pretty spotty. And then we have extreme climates. So we've developed, mining and extraction methods, not only just to accommodate those extreme conditions, but also to leverage them. I'm thinking examples like, freezing the ground to provide containment, to prevent the migration of bad things into the soil, as just an example. So Saskatchewan has one of the most abundant and diverse resource bases in the world. Things like platinum base metals, precious metals, rare earth metals, and energy resources. And we're very lucky to have those things. We are good at mining them, and they are valuable. And just as a coincidence, they're also abundant in high-grade deposits in outer space. And right now we're experiencing a depressed market. There's a lot of very talented people who are unemployed or not fully utilized. I mean, just yesterday, President Biden, signed the order to pull the permit for the Keystone XL pipeline, which I think, regardless of what you believe about pipelines in the future, the oil and energy sector, it's going to mean that there's a lot of people in Western Canada that are going to remain unemployed for longer maybe than they had hoped, or that are soon to become unemployed. And, I think we'd be kidding ourselves to keep, our entire future plan for the economy depending on, having that dependent on kind of these things that seem to be falling by the wayside. The space mining venture that we're going to get into a lot more detail about, it's an opportunity for people who have lost their jobs but still hold really high levels of expertise and talent to look to something to the future, look to something that is going to be economically viable and actually be a growing sector for decades to come. And so another factor, another force that's part of the overall consideration is just our advantage of being in Canada. We have, there's other sources of that competitive advantage, and that's one is financing. So in any given year, 60% of all exploration capital in the world flows through Canada. So we have the financial and legal infrastructure to handle major mining related undertakings, obviously. Canadians are well known for world leadership in exploration, mining, and extraction technologies. And finally, Canada just brings a strong reputation and political stability that makes it attractive for domestic and foreign investment. I mean, just last week there was that article, which I think most people probably saw, that was that placed Saskatchewan as the #1 jurisdiction in the world for mining, and that's a credit to both the provincial and federal forces. So our idea in January 2020 was that all of these forces place Western Canada at a tangible competitive advantage to take what we know and do here on Earth and do the same thing in outer space. And the short to medium term payback would be to take the tech that we are developing for future space mining and use it for on-Earth applications in remote or harsh environments today. And kind of that was it. It was that simple when we started 12 months ago.
So we're here to talk about the journey. And how does anything start? For us, it begins with talking to people. So in January of last year, we basically started requesting meetings with anyone and everybody, or anyone and everyone that works in exploration, mining technology, space, grant writing, research, and as well, we started just attending conferences to get to know players in the industry. And ConvergeX was one of the, first stops for us, which was in Calgary. And it seemed that every conversation that we had ended up leading to 15 others. And with a topic such as this, a lot of people were interested, and there were also a lot of people that were very skeptical. But everyone was gracious, and we had a lot of fun throughout the entire time. And within just a couple of months, we were able to learn, a ton about the industry and meet some really key people who, are eventually going to become key partners in this possible space mining future. One of the individuals, his pictures on the panel there in the background of the slide here. But his name is Sam Reed, and he's a consultant. He does a consultant work for the CSA and also for NASA, and was describing this one challenge that was put out to them by NASA, which was, if an asteroid is coming to Earth, what does humanity do, or what can humanity do to ensure that it doesn't impact Earth, that it doesn't hit us, that it doesn't wipe out humanity? And the way that he described most of the solutions, or all of the solutions that came up from his American counterparts, was to basically send weapons up, blow the asteroid up into a million little pieces, and that'll be it. And he took a different approach and said, well, you don't have to blow this asteroid up. All you have to do is redirect it so that it no longer hits the Earth. And it's these unique perspectives that make this opportunity, a lot more, I would say, a lot more real. Now, along the path, we took the opportunity to apply for several grants through the Canadian Space Agency, as well as the IMII, which is the International Minerals Innovation Institute. And while we were ultimately unsuccessful, we did end up learning a whole lot about the need to develop, or what we need to develop prior to being eligible to get our hands on research dollars. Key learnings, there's already big players in the market today, and they have a tentative eye on the development of space mining tech. Now, we had the opportunity to speak with CEOs and senior executives of space companies and mining companies, and there are brilliant people doing amazing work in the tech sector in Canada. And it's not just the Canada arm, for which the Canadian program is primarily known for, but Canada's contribution, it still is really a niche tech provider. So basically, invent something that solves a problem for another country's space program. Now, this is kind of the point where we realize that that's not something that we want to be doing. what we want to do is use our greatest skills, which is in the project management and project delivery fields, to be able to integrate the tech, the business, and the market come together. And we want to be a Canadian company using a junior mining approach to mining and selling material off of Earth.
And then, I don't know, many of you will still remember this, but in March 2020, the curtain fell on the COVID-19 pandemic, which pretty much wiped out our entire strategy for getting in front of people and talking to different groups about our mining undertaking. It's really, really hard to get people to buy into something so ethereal or so, kind of out there as space mining, and that it's actually something that they want to be involved in. If you're not in the same room with them, if they can't share your energy, if they can't see the twinkle in your eyes. So we had to find a totally different way to continue having conversations with experts and connect people. So we did what everyone does when they get really lonely. We started a podcast. Now it turns out that a podcast is really an amazing way to get people to speak with you, busy people, that might not normally have the time for a couple space enthusiasts from small town Saskatchewan. So over the spring and summer of last year, we got to chat with just some truly fascinating people with incredible ideas. And again, many of these people are going to continue to be a part of our space mining adventure for a long time. And it too was a ton of fun. One notable person that we got to chat with is Daniel Faber, who's the CEO of Orbit Fab. And it's a company that's seeking to build what they call gas stations in space, which is what it is from a functional perspective, and using water or water-based fuels as the gas. So we had, there's thousands of satellites up circling the Earth right now, and their business model is to provide fuel to allow those satellites to stay in operation for a lot longer than was originally planned. So he pushed us towards this notion that there is an immediate market for water in space. So some of the other markets, for precious metals and rare earth metals are a little bit farther out, but there's an immediate market for water. And just after the mics went off on our podcast with Daniel, he offered to buy water from us. So we learned some things during this portion of our journey, and that was space community is very small. Like once you're kind of in the circle, everybody knows everybody. And it's kind of been a more recent phenomenon of ours, but we had a meeting this week with someone who's been working the space sector for quite a while. And at the start of the meeting, they were like, "Oh, you guys are the podcast people. That's right. You guys had that thing. Why'd you only do 6 episodes?" But so we learned a lot about the space community. We also learned that all barriers are not technical or financial. And the further we dig into that, you realize that developing tech for space is actually very, very simple compared to navigating the geopolitical influences, the secure tenure, what that looks like on the moon, how you can, lay claim to any particular, part of outer space without the international treaties that apply on Earth. It's just totally different in outer space. And then in this portion, we also realized that, as I mentioned, the precious and rare earth mining off of Earth is going to be at least 20 years out. But then again, there's this near-term opportunity for lunar water.
Yeah, so lunar water, water in space. Now, water wears many hats on the moon. It's used to supply the necessary life support systems, such as just human consumption and for producing air. And it's also effective as a radiation shield for the astronauts. And it can also be converted into propellant. Now, all of these things are essential for the Artemis mission to succeed and have the possibility of a permanent human base on the moon. Now, water also exists in many different forms. Over the past decade is really when NASA and other government organizations have found or realized that there is that there is water on the moon, and it is primarily found in the polar regions, in the permanently shadowed areas of the moon, but it's also in potentially higher grades and higher volume water deposits in subsurface formations. Now what you're seeing here, or sorry, what is critical is that it can be used as a propellant. So either as fancy rocket fuel like liquid hydrogen, or just even more simply as steam. Now, there are existing propellant systems that use just steam, which is basically the same principle as a tea kettle. So what you'll see here is a liter of water. Fresh, delicious Aquafina water. Now, get that liter of water off of the surface of the Earth to the moon costs about $4,500. Now, to carry that same liter of water, or another liter of water, I guess, if you want, to low Earth orbit, is $2,800. Now, if you wanted to take a liter of water from the moon and take it to low Earth orbit, it only costs $1,700. So if you're able to get it there for under $1,100 to be able to produce it and ship it, then there's a business case for use as a propellant. And if you're able to produce it for under $4,500 a liter for use on the moon, then the opportunity becomes incredible.
So the obvious question is, how much water could we possibly need in space? I mean, there's only a couple people up there at any given time, but the answer is a lot more than you might think. So the market for water, or water-based fuel in space today, is about 250,000 liters a year, which is a lot if you think about how expensive it is to lift off of Earth. That's just into low Earth orbit. Based on the growth of the satellite industry, so we're talking thousands and thousands of satellites being launched every year. A good example of that is SpaceX Starlink, which is the constellation of satellites that's going to bring internet access to every square inch of the face of the Earth in the next year or two. It's actually already in Canada. And then on top of that, opportunities for satellite servicing and refueling. That number, so the volume of water that's going to be required in low Earth orbit, is going to increase to about 1.3 million liters of water per year, or half of an Olympic-sized swimming pool by 2025. That's only 4 years away. Now, by 2030, in low Earth orbit, there's expected to be an annual demand of an entire Olympic-sized swimming pool, so twice that in 2025. Now, what's the cost to lift an Olympic-sized swimming pool full of water to low Earth orbit? It's about $1.2 billion using modern rocket technology. But those numbers, that's just low Earth orbit. Those numbers pale in comparison to the water that's going to be required to support the Artemis mission on the moon. Of course, 2021, there's absolutely nothing there yet. So the demand for water on the moon is nothing as of today. But by 2025, just 4 short years away, if things in the Artemis program move along as planned, the annual requirement for water on the moon will be 2 Olympic-sized swimming pools, or $5 million. Now keep in mind, way more expensive to get water from Earth to the moon than it is from Earth to low Earth orbit. By 2030, that number is 5 Olympic-sized swimming pools per year, 13 million liters of water a year. And what's the cost to lift that water from the Earth to the moon? It's more than $40 billion a year. Now, to put that in perspective, NASA's entire budget for 2021 is $42 billion. So obviously, they need to find a different way to get water on the moon's surface really quickly. So we haven't just made these numbers up. They were actually pulled from an economic study that was published by WGM, which is a Canadian geological consulting firm, in August 2019. And they wrote that report in response to the United States announcement of the Artemis program, and the realization that the demand for these resources in outer space are about to skyrocket if the United States goes forward with their plan. So this is the demand. If you stretch it out, extrapolate that, well, not extrapolating, it's using other market forces, but extrapolating that out to 2050, we're looking upwards of 40,000 tons of water needed in space, either between the moon or low Earth orbit, by 2050. So that doesn't include any Mars activities, which is the whole reason they're kind of staging towards the moon, is so then they could eventually expand out to Mars. So this is just in Earth orbit but including the moon, over 40,000 tons. So the cost to lift all of that material from the Earth, all that water from the Earth, over that period of time goes from, in 2025, kind of mentioned in the kind of $40 billion range. By 2050, the cost of lifting that water per year is expected to be $140 billion. So just a ridiculous, like not even nonsensical cost just to lift water from the Earth. Now, that same study that it theorized some different strategies for extracting water, which we'll talk about in a little more detail later. But the estimated cost to produce a liter of water on the or to produce a ton, of water on the moon is about $500,000. So if we're producing water on the moon instead of lifting it from Earth, that gray line represents that cost. So you can see it is a considerable difference. And by 2030, that number's in the tens of billions of dollars. But by 2050, we're talking the hundreds of billions of dollars in savings to produce the water on the moon versus producing it on the Earth and blasting it up to the moon. So it's a massive market. And in order to accommodate that development on the moon, you're going to have to find some way to get the resources from the moon.
Now, based on this long-term 1000x opportunity, as well as just the near-term revenue opportunity, we decided to make our first tangible push into our space mining adventure. So we partnered with a like-minded individual from Calgary and ended up founding the LUNAR Water Supply Company. And this has been the culmination of everything that we set out to do and everything that we learned in the meantime. So the LUNAR Water Supply Company intends to basically operate as a utility, providing reliable, cost-effective, high-quality water in market volumes on the surface of the moon. And we aren't the only ones looking at water on the moon, obviously. In fact, NASA has put out challenges and competitions to develop ideas and technology to extract water from the lunar regolith. And it doesn't take a rocket scientist, I guess, to realize that it's not a great idea to compete with NASA. Now, NASA's plan is basically as follows. Using Silicon Valley-esque technology, they want to land a rover with an excavator on the moon, dig up the surface regolith that has very low concentrations of water, and then process the heck out of it. And the first cup of water is essentially going to be produced this way on the moon. Now, our plan is a little bit different. So it's theorized, although not yet proven, that beneath the surface of the moon, there are vast, high-density, high-grade deposits of water that have been brought to the surface of the moon through impacts with icy asteroids. Now, our plan is to land a moon-grade drill on the surface of the moon and use similar methods that are used currently in Western Canada to reach these high-volume deposits and use the applicable mining methods such as SAGD and scale that water production 100x of what NASA is doing. So it's as simple as that.
So the question everyone asks is, you've got this long-term vision. What do you do today to kind of work your way towards that? And so this has been, like any kind of startup venture, you take a bunch of different paths, you walk down them a little ways, then you determine whether you want to continue or else switch paths. And so what we have done, where we've landed now, I guess, is that we've kind of created 3 pillars, short-term goals. One is to establish a market presence in the space mining sector, which is, of course, critical. If people are going to take you seriously, if they're going to see you as a player, if they're going to be coming to you for partnership opportunities or to source what's going to be needed for their undertakings, you have to have some sort of market presence. So we're looking at 2 ways of doing that. One is a lunar data platform. Now, there's geological data from across the entire globe that is stored at different universities and in different kind of data sets with different coordinate systems tied to the information. And it's really, really difficult and time consuming and expensive for researchers to sift through everything and get their spatial get everything, looking in the right place, I'd say, across the different data sets. And so we're right now developing a LUNAR data platform to compile everything that's out there in terms of geological research of the moon, and put it into one platform that's easily searchable. The idea being that, we got universities and researchers and, economic development types are going to be able to use that data to develop fancy models and make their research much more efficient. That they'll pay us to do that, to have that hosted in a place. And then the second is a lunar surface mining simulator that we're currently developing with some students at the University of Saskatchewan. Just a high level design, but if you're going to go to the moon, you want to find out before you are millions of miles away that maybe an O-ring doesn't hold up to the temperature swings of minus 200 degrees to plus 125 degrees, in 2-week increments. Like, you need to know that information before you send it up there. So we're in the early phases of developing a mining simulator just for the moon, just to simulate the moon surface in order for us to de-risk, and for other companies to de-risk their off-Earth and lunar mining plans. Then, of course, looking for strategic partnerships. There's some fields of expertise that we just simply don't have. Things like moon geology and planetary science. It's different from the Earth. Most of the deposits on the moon have been placed via asteroid impacts, and that's just not the case here on Earth. So it's a lot different, and it's moon geology is kind of its own subdiscipline of planetary science. And then exploration, instrumentation, actually designing and creating those missions. We've never done that before, but that will be part of the plan. And then finally, obviously, financing with any company, any startup company especially. That's something always front of mind. Looking at a few ways of making sure that we are sustaining ourselves from a financial perspective. One is through bootstrapping the company, creating an initial revenue source, keep driving money in with the federal government. We want that money to flow further west, that we can use it in Western Canada to continue to drive research into the mining sector and efficiency improvements.
All right. So this has been the journey for us over the past year. As we've worked towards mining in outer space, and for us, it really comes back to the dream. Doing something of consequence and something that affects those around us in a positive way.
So nobody else has joined, so just let's see here.
There, I think I kicked them out.
Good. You think you got them? Okay. I didn't see who it was, so. Goodness sakes.
So we know that we're not going to be doing this alone. We need a strong and diverse team of talented people and partners in order to succeed. And innovation needs diversity. Diverse people with unique perspectives and ideas to create solutions to solve these complex problems. And that forms the basic philosophy of what the Lunar Water Supply Company and Peter Lucas Project Management stand for. So we would like to thank Women in Mining and Women in Nuclear Saskatchewan for having us here today. The last slide there.
Well, you pretty much got through it, so that's good. This has been recorded, unfortunately, I think, for part of it, but we'll get it to our members for sure. You too. I'm so
Perfect.
sorry about that.
Oh, it's okay. We'll edit that part out, I assume.
But yeah, we ask anybody that wants to check out the website for us, peterlucas.ca and lunarwatersupply.com. You can also check out the podcast just by searching Unearthed across all the major podcast platforms, and you can also follow us at the Twitter handle at Space Unearthed, and follow the companies on LinkedIn, Facebook, and Twitter. And as we had mentioned before, we're looking for organizations and people to partner with. So we've developed a quick 15-minute pitch that we'd love to share with anyone in their organizations, either in a meeting about innovation or lunch and learn platform or something like that. So feel free to email us at jared.peterson@peterlucas.ca or brandon.harris@peterlucas.ca as well. So yeah, I don't know if there are any questions or anything like that, but I see Bram, you're on there. Maybe you have a question.
He did say in his chat, thank you for the presentation. Yeah.
Right on.
Yeah, no, great presentation. It looks like there's not many of us left.
No.
If I can ask a question, I will.
Yeah, go for it.
Just curious, how much optimism is baked into some of those ramp up numbers for water supply on the moon, and just for framing the question, like I was just looking at something that said the original economic analysis for the space shuttle program, they were thinking like 50 plus launches per year, right? And it ended up being maybe a half dozen or so.
Mhm.
But how do you feel about the accuracy of those projections?
So if you look at the that WGM report that we had mentioned, you can just Google WGM, probably lunar water, something like that. Just Google that, and in that report, it describes all the assumptions that are put into those numbers. And so I think it's on the conservative side, actually, because there are a number of activities which haven't been confirmed, but they're still, like, they could be added over and above what those projections are.
Yeah, and I think it's a hybrid too. So like definitely the higher risk, I'd say, of being pushed out or being optimistic is the lunar surface work. So stuff related to Artemis mission. I mean, we've got a new administration in the United States. They, you don't know what direction. I mean, there's been some indication that that they're still interested in pursuing the Artemis mission, but things are subject to change. But so that's why I kind of characterize those differently. Is the moon stuff is higher risk, but the Earth orbit volumes, those are probably about as accurate as you can expect. Like those, companies like SpaceX, you can see how regularly they're launching payload into outer space. Companies like Orbit Fab that I mentioned, they just closed a $6 million funding round to continue the development of their gas stations in space. And there's companies that are in that same space that are actually tow trucks in space, and all they do is fly around and grab satellites and carry them to new orbits in which they'll be useful for many more years. So I would say the lunar stuff is subject to potentially getting pushed out if the Artemis mission is delayed because of funding. But the stuff related to the water supply or demand related to the low Earth orbit industry, that's already there.
Right. Yeah, no, thanks for the answers, guys. I'm following you real closely. So